the desert rose of Blackthorn Ranch. The wind howled across the New Mexico plains, a restless spirit that churned red dust into swirling ghosts, dancing over the empty streets of Blackthorn Ranch. The sun hung low, a molten orb painting the horizon in streaks of crimson and gold. Its fading rays glinting off a rusted weather vane atop a sagging barn, its creak a mournful dirge in the stillness. Rosa Mendes, a strikingly beautiful cowgirl of 26, reined in her gnarled bay mare, Soul, her hazel eyes, deep and luminous as polished agate, scanning the desolate spread that had been her family's heart. Her long dark curls cascaded beneath a weathered hat, its brim tilted against the glare, and her calloused hands, honed by years of wielding a lasso, gripped the reins with a steadiness that belied the storm in her chest. Her denim shirt clung to her sweat-dampened back, her spurs jingled faintly with each step, and the colt at her hip, its walnut grip worn smooth, was a silent promise of her skill. Blackthorn Ranch, nestled in a valley cradled by jagged red cliffs, was a husk of its former glory, corrals bare, fences splintered, the saloon's faded sign flapping like a broken wing, its hinges groaning in the breeze. Her father, Rosa Mendes, had carved this place from the desert with sweat and stubborn dreams, raising longhorns and taming mustangs until a riding accident stole him 2 years ago, in the spring of 1885. Now, in the summer of 1887, Rosa had returned to save Blackthorn from ruin, only to find it overrun by skotokrad, led by Luke Crow, Drake, a man whose name was a curse in Torrance County, and whose past with Rosa was a wound that refused to heal. The main street of Blackthorn stretched before her, a ghostly ribbon of sand and tumbleweeds, flanked by a sagging livery stable, a general store with shattered windows, and a saloon with a faded sign, Blackthorn's Rest, creaking in the wind. A broken wagon wheel lay half buried in the dirt, its spokes cracked like old bones, and a rusted horseshoe dangled from a post, clinking softly. The silence was oppressive, broken only by a coyote's distant howl and the weather vane's ceaseless creak, a sound that set Rosa's nerves on edge. She dismounted, her boots crunching on the sandy street, her dark curls swaying as she tethered Soul to a splintered post. The air carried the sharp bite of sage, the faint tang of coming rain, and the bitter weight of betrayal. She'd heard the rumors in a smoky saloon in Mesilla, 10 miles east. Blackthorn was lost, its pastures plundered by a band of outlaws under Drake's command. A gunslinger whose raven-black duster and cold grey eyes struck fear into ranchers and drovers alike. The skotokrad had been rustling cattle, stripping barns and bullying smallholders into selling their land for pennies, leaving a trail of empty homesteads across the county. Rosa's gut churned with a truth she couldn't shake. Drake wasn't just a thief, he was her former betrothed, a man she'd rejected 3 years ago when his greed and temper turned dark. And now he was working for Harlan Cole, a railroad magnate whose ambition to lay tracks through Torrance County threatened to choke the life from its ranches. Blackthorn, with its spring-fed pastures, was the key, and Rosa was determined to stop him. She wasn't alone in this fight. At her side rode her younger sister, Lila, a live 22-year-old with a sharpshooter's eye, and a longbow slung across her back, her auburn hair tied in a tight braid that swung with her movements. Lila's green eyes, sharp as a hawk's, missed nothing, and her arrows flew true, a skill honed by years of hunting with their father. With them was Hank, a grizzled cowboy trapper pushing 60. His face weathered like old saddle leather, his tobacco-stained fingers always twitching for a chew or his trusted sharp's carbine. His stories of trapping in the Sangre de Cristos were as legendary as his aim, and his loyalty to the Mendes family was as unyielding as the desert itself. They'd been joined in Mesilla by Taza, a quiet mescalero Apache guide with dark eyes and a knack for reading the land. His braided hair adorned with a single eagle feather, his bow and quiver a silent promise of precision. They were family, not just by blood with Lila, but by the bonds forged in campfires, shared dangers, and the relentless will to survive the Wild West's cruelty. Rosa's hand rested on her colt, its weight a familiar comfort, as she studied the empty streets. "This ain't our home no more," she murmured, her voice low, her hazel eyes narrowing at the faint smoke curling from the barn's chimney. Lila dismounted, her bow ready, her braids swinging as she tethered her grey mare Luna to a post. "Looks like a damn graveyard," she said, her voice sharp, her green eyes scanning the rooftops for movement. Hank spat tobacco into the dust, his weathered hat tilted back, his grey eyes glinting with suspicion. "Skotokrad don't leave a place this quiet unless they're expecting trouble. They're here, Rosa, watching." Taza crouched, his fingers tracing fresh hoofprints in the sand, his voice soft but certain. 12 horses, maybe more. Fresh tracks leading to the corrals. Rosa's jaw set, her curls catching the fading light. She'd roped mustangs wilder than any man, and she'd be damned if Drake and his band stole her father's legacy. "We take it back," she said, her voice a blade, her hazel eyes burning with resolve. "But we do it smart." That night, under a sky thick with stars, they camped in a dry gulch a mile from the ranch, the air heavy with the scent of burning mesquite and the faint musk of sagebrush. Hank spread a tattered map across a flat rock, its edges frayed, the firelight flickering on its creases as he traced Blackthorn's layout with a calloused finger. "Main Street's a death trap," he said, his voice rough as gravel, his tobacco-stained teeth flashing in the glow. "Narrow, with roofs for snipers. Old well behind the liveries dry, good for hiding or eavesdropping. Corrals are north, where they're holding the cattle, likely 60 head or more." Rosa crouched beside him, her curls brushing the map, her mind racing like a Mustang. "We can't take 'em head on. Drake's got numbers and he knows this land. We need to draw 'em out, make 'em chase shadows." Lila, sharpening an arrow with a whetstone, nodded, her green eyes sharp. "Stage a fake cattle drive. Use strays to lure 'em into the open, then trap 'em in the streets or the gulch." Taza, sitting cross-legged, his bow across his lap, added, "The canyon north of the ranch, narrow, with high walls. Good for an ambush, if we can lead them there." Hank chuckled, spitting tobacco into the fire. "Girl, you got Mateo's brains and Lila's fire. Let's give these skotokrad a dance they won't forget." Their plan was daring, born of desperation and cowboy cunning. They'd borrow strays from Amos Reed, a wiry rancher whose spread bordered Blackthorn, his herd gutted by Drake's raids. Rosa had met Amos in Messiah's saloon, a dimly lit den of whiskey and secrets, where drovers traded tales and fear hung thick as cigar smoke. Amos, his hands trembling as he poured coffee from a tin pot, had confirmed her suspicions. "It's Harlan Cole, the railroad man," he'd whispered, his eyes darting to the saloon's door. "He's buying up land for tracks, using Drake to scare folks out. Your daddy, Rosa, he wouldn't sell. That's why they hit Blackthorn so hard." Rosa's heart clenched, her hazel eyes darkening. Her father had been a cowboy to his bones, refusing to bow to drought, rustlers or greed. He'd found a spring on Blackthorn's land, a lifeline in the desert, and Cole wanted it to secure his rail empire. In the saloon, Rosa also met Clara, a sharp-tongued barmaid with a limp and a knack for overhearing secrets. Clara slipped her a folded note, her father's last letter, hidden in his desk before the accident. Mateo knew Cole was dirty, Clara said, wiping the scarred counter, her voice low. Found a map to a hidden well, said it'd save Blackthorn. It's still there if the skotokrad didn't burn it. Rosa tucked the note into her vest, her curls swaying as she tipped her hat. Much obliged, Clara. The letter, its ink faded but legible, spoke of the well and a promise. Blackthorn's yours, Rosa. Fight for it. By dawn, Rosa and Lila scouted the ranch from a ridge, their horses hidden behind red rock spires, the air heavy with the scent of dust and sage. The streets lay empty, but smoke curled from the barn's chimney, and hoofprints crisscrossed the sand, fresh and deliberate. Rosa's eyes caught a glint of steel from the saloon's roof, a lookout's rifle. They're dug in, she whispered, her hat pulled low, her curls tucked beneath it, her Colt ready at her hip. Lila, her bow slung across her back, counted shadows in the livery. 10, maybe 12. Drake's got the place locked tight. Tarsa, his dark eyes scanning the ground, pointed to a dry gulch behind the ranch. That's our way in. Hidden, but narrow. Won the stake and we're trapped. Hank, chewing tobacco, nodded, his Sharp's carbine resting on his shoulder. Then we don't make mistakes. Rosa's plan crystallized. Drive Amos's strays past the ranch at dusk, loud enough to tempt the bandits, then use the empty streets as a maze, funneling the skotokrad into traps at the well, livery, and a collapsed barn. But as Rosa crept closer to scout the corrals, a lasso snapped from the shadows, and rough hands dragged her into the barn, her Colt knocked from her hip, her wrists bound with rawhide. Drake's voice, cold and familiar, cut through the darkness. "Welcome home, Rosa," he sneered, his grey eyes glinting as he loomed over her, his raven black duster sweeping the floor. "You should have said yes when you had the chance." The barn was a prison of dust and shadows, its rafters sagging under the weight of years, the air thick with the smell of mouldy hay and fear. Rosa sat against a splintered post, her wrists chafed by rawhide, her dark curls spilling over her shoulders, her hazel eyes blazing with defiance despite the ropes that bound her. Drake paced before her, his scarred hand gripping a revolver, his face a mask of old wounds and new greed. "Blackthorn's mine now," he said. His voice low, his grey eyes tracing her face with a mix of anger and regret. "Cole pays better than your daddy ever did, and this land's worth more under rails than cattle." Rosa's smile was sharp as a blade, her voice steady despite the ache in her wrists. "You're a fool, Luke. This ranch will bury you before Cole's tracks ever touch it." Among the bandits was Jake, a young drifter with nervous eyes and a battered hat, his hands twitching as he guarded her, his revolver holstered but unsteady. Rosa sensed his doubt, his glances lingering too long, his fingers hesitating on his gun. She leaned closer, her voice soft, her curls catching the lantern's dim glow. "You don't belong with them. Help me, and you'll have a place here." Jake's jaw tightened, his eyes darting to the barn's door, but he didn't answer, his silence a crack in his loyalty. Outside, Lila, Hank, and Taser planned her rescue, their camp hidden in the gulch. The starry sky above them a canvas of cold light. Lila's fingers gripped her bow, her green eyes fierce, her braids swinging as she paced. "We hit 'em at night," she said, her voice sharp with urgency. "Use the streets, make 'em chase ghosts." Hank, his Sharp's carbine ready, nodded, his tobacco-stained fingers tracing the map. "Barn's the key. Get Rosa out and we can turn the tables." But Drake's smart. He'll have men on the roofs. Taysa, his eagle feather glinting in the firelight, added, "The canyon north of the ranch. It's a trap if we lead them there. High walls, narrow pass. We can use the land against them." Amos, who joined them with 20 head of strays, his face lined with worry, offered his support. "For Mateo," he said, his voice breaking. "He'd have done the same for me." Back in the barn, Rosa searched for a way out, her eyes scanning the shadows, her heart pounding with the weight of her father's legacy. Under a loose floorboard, she found a tattered map, its edges frayed, marked with Mateo's handwriting. A hidden well, buried deep in a canyon north of Blackthorn, the key to the ranch's survival. She tucked it into her boot, her curls damp with sweat, her hazel eyes gleaming with purpose. When Jake brought her water, she caught his gaze, her voice low and steady. "You know Drake's using you, Jake. Help me and we'll stop him, for good." Jake hesitated, his eyes flickering with doubt, then slipped her a small knife, his whisper barely audible. "Midnight. Be ready." As dusk fell, the team launched their plan. Lila and Hank drove the strays past the ranch, their bellows echoing through the empty streets, the weather vanes spinning wildly in a rising wind that carried the scent of rain. The bandits stirred, shadows moving on the saloon's roof, boots thumping in the livery, their low whistles signaling their approach. Rosa, her wrists cut free by Jake's knife, waited in the barn, her hazel eyes locked on the door, her heart racing but her hands steady. At midnight she lit a pile of dry straw with a stolen match, the flames flaring bright, smoke billowing as she kicked open the barn's door. The fire spread, licking the rafters, and shouts erupted as the bandits scrambled, their silhouettes chaotic in the growing blaze. Rosa slipped into the streets, her curls flying, her boots silent on the sand. The map in her boot a burning weight. Lila, hidden in the livery, loosed an arrow that pinned a bandit's duster to a post, her aim precise, her green eyes steady. Hank fired a warning shot from the well, the crack splitting the night, sending the skotokrad diving for cover. Tarza, moving like a shadow, used his knife to cut a rope, dropping a stack of crates in the livery, trapping 2 bandits in a cloud of dust. Jake, torn between loyalty and redemption, hesitated, then joined Rosa, his revolver drawn but unfired, his eyes wide with fear and resolve. A sandstorm hit with the fury of a demon, a howling wall of grit that swallowed Blackthorn, turning the empty streets into a blinding haze. Rosa tied her bandana over her face, her hazel eyes squinting through the dust, her dark curls whipping in the wind like a banner of defiance. She shouted to Lila, her voice muffled but clear, directing her to funnel the bandits toward the gulch. The storm was a double-edged sword. It hid their movements but threatened to scatter the herd and bury their plans. Lila, her bow steady, loosed arrows that pinned gear to walls, sowing chaos without drawing blood, her braids swinging as she darted between buildings. Hank, his trapper's instinct sharp, rigged another rope to collapse a sagging fence, tripping a bandit who cursed as he fell. Tarza, his eagle feather barely visible in the dust, moved silently, his bow felling a lantern that sparked panic among the skotokrad's horses, sending them bolting into the storm. Rosa, with Jake at her side, darted through the streets, her lasso snapping to trip a skotokrad, his revolver skidding into the sand. Drake, his black duster flapping like a raven's wings, mounted his stallion and bolted for the desert, his grey eyes burning with rage as he realized his crew was crumbling. Rosa leapt onto Soul, her curls streaming, her heart pounding with the thrill of the hunt, the map in her boot a beacon of hope. She gave chase, her hazel eyes locked on Drake's shadow ahead, the storm fading to reveal a sky ablaze with stars, the red cliffs of New Mexico looming like ancient sentinels. Lila flanked left, her bow drawn, her green eyes sharp as she rode Luna, while Hank and Taser took a high trail, their weapons ready. Jake, riding beside Rosa, his face pale but determined, shouted, "He's heading for the canyon, that's where the well is!" The trail narrowed into a jagged pass, its walls steep and treacherous, the air cool and sharp with the scent of sage and dust. Rosa's instincts, honed by years of roping mustangs, screamed of a trap, but the map in her boot drove her forward, its promise of water and redemption fueling her fire. A sudden rumble shook the ground, an obval, loose boulders crashing from the cliffs above, triggered by Drake's men lying in wait. Rosa swerved, soul rearing as rocks tumbled around them, dust choking the air, her curls plastered to her face. Lila's arrow pinned an ambusher's hat to a tree, her aim flawless, while Hank's rope pulled a boulder clear, his trapper's skill saving Rosa from a crushing end. Taser, his bow drawn, loosed an arrow that scattered 2 skotokrad, their rifles clattering down the rocks. Jake fired a warning shot, his voice breaking as he shouted, "Stay back!" His loyalty now fully with Rosa. The canyon dead-ended at a narrow pass, its walls towering like the jaws of a beast, the starlight casting long shadows across the sand. Drake was cornered, his black stallion snorting, his revolver glinting in his scarred hand, his grey eyes wild with fury and desperation. "You broke my heart, Rosa," he snarled, his voice trembling with old pain, his duster flapping in the wind. "Now I'll break yours. This ranch, this well, it's all mine." Rosa's hazel eyes narrowed, her lasso coiled in her hand, her voice cold as steel. "You broke yourself, Luke. Blackthorn belongs to the desert, and the desert don't bow to you or Cole." She didn't fire. Her fight was for justice, not vengeance. Lila's arrow pinned Drake's sleeve to a post, her green eyes steady, her bow unwavering. Hank and Taser closed in, their weapons trained, while Jake stood beside Rosa, his revolver lowered, his eyes steady with newfound purpose. Drake's men, seeing their leader trapped, dropped their guns, their hands raised in surrender, their faces pale in the starlight. Rosa tied Drake's wrists with her lasso, her knots tight as her father's lessons, her curls catching the breeze as she led him back to Blackthorn, his defiance crumbling with every step. Back at the ranch, the empty streets glowed under the dawn's pale light, the dust settled, the weather vanes creaked softer now, a whisper of resilience. Amos arrived with Sheriff Boone, a grizzled lawman with a limp and a badge worn by years of frontier justice, and Clara, the barmaid, who'd rallied local ranchers with her sharp tongue and sharper wits. Boone studied the map Rosa found, its lines marking the hidden well in the canyon, and a ledger from the saloon's hidden safe, detailing Cole's payments to Drake for rustling, intimidation, and forged deeds. "Cole's been squeezing Torrance County dry," Boone said, spitting into the dirt, his eyes hard. "Your daddy, Rosa? He found that well." "That's why they hit Blackthorn." Clara, her face lined with grit, added, "Mateo wanted you to fight. You did him proud, girl." Rosa's heart sank, her hazel eyes misting, but her resolve hardened, her curls swaying as she handed the ledger to Boone. "Take it to the federal marshal. End Cole's game." Boone nodded, his badge glinting in the sun, his voice gruff. "Cole's got pull, but this'll hurt him. Stay sharp, Rosa." The team spent weeks rebuilding Blackthorn, hammering new boards over broken windows, mending corrals, and driving the recovered herd. 80 head, including Amos's strays, back to its pastures. Rosa walked the streets, no longer silent, but alive with the clatter of hammers, the lowing of cattle, and the laughter of ranch hands. Lila, her bow slung across her back, helped rebuild the livery, her green eyes bright with hope, her braid swinging as she worked. Hank, chewing tobacco, regaled Amos's hands with tales of trapping, his sharps propped against a fence, his tobacco-stained fingers gesturing wildly. Taser, his eagle feather glinting, taught the ranchers to read the land, his quiet wisdom binding the group. Jake, now a ranch hand, worked beside them, his nervous eyes softened by purpose, his battered hat a badge of redemption. Clara, pouring coffee from a tin pot, organized the ranchers, her sharp tongue rallying them to stand against Cole's railroad. The saloon sign was repainted, its door now steady, and the weather vane spun gently in a warm breeze, its creak a song of renewal. Rosa found her father's journal in the ranch house, its pages yellowed but filled with his dreams of the well and a note. "Blackthorn's heart is you and Lila. Keep it beating." She tucked it into her vest, her hazel eyes bright with purpose, her colt a familiar weight at her hip. She led a team to the canyon, following the map, and uncovered the hidden well, its waters clear and cold, a lifeline that promised to restore Blackthorn's pastures. The ranchers cheered, their voices carrying across the valley, a testament to Mateo's vision and Rosa's courage. The well's discovery sent ripples through Torrance County, emboldening smallholders to resist Cole's schemes, their defiance a spark that could ignite a broader fight. The final night they gathered around a campfire, the herd quiet under a starlit sky, the air warm with the scent of coffee, mesquite and hope. Leela sharpened an arrow, her braids swinging, her green eyes thoughtful. "Cole come for us," she said, her voice soft but firm. "He don't quit easy." Rosa smirked, her curls catching the firelight, her hazel eyes glinting with defiance. "Let him try. We're Mendes and this is Blackthorn." Hank chuckled, spitting tobacco into the flames, his weathered face creased with a grin. "Damn right, girl. Ain't no skotokrad or railroad man taking this ranch again." Taza, his bow across his lap, nodded, his dark eyes steady, his eagle feather glinting. "The land fights with us. It always will." Jake, stirring a pot of beans, added, "I'm with you, Rosa, for good." Clara, pouring coffee, raised her mug, her sharp smile a promise of solidarity. "To Blackthorn," she said, her voice carrying across the plains. The laughter rose, a defiance of the silence that had haunted the ranch, a song of resilience that echoed through the valley. Rosa looked to the horizon, where the red cliffs glowed under the stars, their jagged edges softened by the night. The fight wasn't over. Cole's shadow loomed, his railroad a threat that could return with greater force. But with Lila's arrows, Hank's traps, Taza's wisdom, Jake's redemption, Clara's grit, and the ranchers at her side, Rosa was ready for whatever the Wild West threw next. Blackthorn Ranch stood tall, its streets no longer silent but pulsing with the heartbeat of family, the grit of cowboys, and the promise of a new dawn. The desert wind carried their laughter, a melody of courage, and the hidden well's waters flowed, a testament to Mateo's legacy and the desert rose's unbreakable spirit.